The year was 1986. It was midsummer. There was this young guy from Europe who had been driving across Canada on his own for the first time for about a month already. He'd seen most of the provinces, from Ontario, even a part of Quebec, moving on west all the way, and now he had driven through the territory of Yukon, approaching the Alaska border. Having seen borders the way they are in Europe, the guy didn't really know what was to expect at the Alaska border. The border was really quiet that day. There was no other cars. Anyways, at the crossing, he noticed that there was nobody waiting for him. There was nobody at the window trying to check his passport or whatever. But when he peeked inside the, what do you call that, office, cubicle, there's a guy reading the paper. So he decided to kind of wave, but you know that nobody was returning his wave. The guy wasn't even looking, and just drive right through. This was the way borders were in Europe, so why wouldn't it be the same in North America? But then he got this funny feeling in his stomach. Hey, this is not the way I heard about it. Maybe there's something fishy here. So he decides to look in the mirror, put the car in reverse, back right up. Now there was a guy standing at the window. The first words that came out of his mouth were, "Border runner, eh?" Like that, just like Canadians say the A, but this was a US border. Anyways, he told the guy, "Park your car, come inside the office." And as he was parking the car, there was somebody watching him the whole time. What followed was an hour-long interrogation. Where are you going? What made you think you could go through the border like this? Why are you going this route instead of that one? Do you have any criminal history? Have you ever used illicit drugs? All this kind of stuff. And what do you think happened later? I can tell you because that guy was me. At the time, I was still living in Germany. I wasn't even Canadian. I was German. I was visiting Canada for a summer-long trip. I had bought an old car in Toronto, and I had driven all the way out to the west of Canada, then up to the north, the Alaska Highway. It was a fantastic adventure. Did I worry about borders? No, Canada is the second largest country in the world, and there are no borders except when you get to Alaska, and of course when you go south to the United States. Those are the only land borders Canada has. Well, what do you think happened later that day? Was I arrested or was I let go? But see, to give you a bit of a history, when I grew up in Germany, we had two kinds of borders actually. To the west, example, the border to the Netherlands, you might as well say Belgium was the same way, and further south, France, it wasn't a big deal. We could basically drive through the border, family in the car, you approach the Dutch border, there might be a guy waving to you, no passport required, no control, no words exchanged, no questions asked, nothing. Car after car after car just going through. Not a big deal. They might as well just put up a sign, "Welcome to the Netherlands." But there was still a booth there. But we also had a border with the eastern part of Germany, which back in those days was the so-called German Democratic Republic. It was a communist state that was under the control of the Soviet Union. So that border was a whole different story. There were people getting shot at if they tried to cross, especially from the east to the west. People that were trying to escape the eastern part. They had to figure out a way to get across that border. Some of them did. A lot of them didn't make it. It cost them their lives. Now, for us people going from West Germany to visit relatives in the East, we had to endure controls. We had to present passports, apply for visas, pay money for each day that we're supposed to be in the eastern part of our own country. This was not a different country, guys. This was Germany and Germany. They were rolling mirrors under the cars. They were taking trunks apart. They were doing all these things. And this was my early experience with borders. There were just two types of it. And I figured since Canada and the United States were friendly countries, allies, and all this, the border wouldn't be a big deal. Does that now make sense to you? Gonna take a sip of my coffee here first before we go on. Make sure this camera is still recording. Yeah, obviously, it must be. Can't see the light from here, that's why. Many years later, I was living in Canada, I was married, had kids already, but then, don't ask me why, this was just a childhood dream of mine. I became a trucker. And because of this NAFTA trade agreement, all the trucking jobs that were available in Canada were basically cross-border. Canada to the United States. United States back to Canada. Canada to Mexico. But we dropped the trailer in the United States, Laredo, Texas, get another load from either Mexico or somewhere else in Texas back to Canada. Sometimes go to, from Ontario I was based, go to the Boston area, go back to Canada same day, go back to the United States the next day. It was like that. So I was crossing the border up to, I'd say, 4 times a week. The only thing that I can say about that border was US and Canadian government puppets with guns asking stupid questions, creating paperwork that really slows down the economy, slows down trade, and it's just a big obstacle. Border security, well, there's still plenty of land between the border checkpoints where people could easily cross. It's no secret that people have done this. People are still finding ways to do this. And how much money are we spending on this border? Myself, if I would add up all the time that waiting at the border cost me over the years, it'd be a fortune. It'd be in the tens of thousands of dollars. My feeling about borders, besides my own perspective as a traveler, you could probably guess by now that it's not the most positive, guys. Borders. Do we really need them? Good Saturday morning coffee, guys. Let me tell you another experience, once again a few years later, that I had with borders. So after I got divorced and quit trucking and all this, the first thing that I did was a bicycle tour. It took me from Ontario, Canada, across the US border by bicycle. Again, lots of questions asked, how are you supporting yourself? All this stuff that is really nobody's business. But because you're entering a country, now they got to make sure that you're okay. But this is not what I'm getting at. I started traveling by bicycle extensively. And one of my biggest tours, and the one with far the most borders to cross, was from Mexico to Panama. Pretty much all of Central America, more or less on the west side, some on the east side, zigzag. Lots of borders to cross. And the revelation that I had during that trip was that borders are almost like toll booths. The countries of Central America, while they have cultural differences and stuff, they all share the same language, except for Belize. Some of them use the US currency. Back then it was El Salvador and Panama. But other than that, there are dudes sitting at the counter, and essentially they're toll collectors. They don't really check anything. They don't really check your background or anything like that. What they do is they look at your passport, they ask you for money, put a stamp on it, have a nice day. So this is what's going on, and there's very little transparency with most countries. Mexico is especially bad. It's a revenue source. The border, in those cases, I saw it as a revenue source. Of course, all these countries are sovereign. They may have differences between each other, different administration, but it's a border. The strict controls, all this infrastructure. Go to this office, have the guy stamp your passport, do this. You can exchange the money over there. Why? Why is it necessary? It's a revenue source. Now, let me ask you this. Why do we have borders? Why do we trust in borders? And why is it such a big deal to have border security? Well, I believe there are reasons for it, like a country's sovereignty, like keeping order, and perhaps keeping criminals out of one's country. What I have to say is that when it comes, for example, to the US border, the border has to be more secure, they say. The border has to be better protected. But from what? From who? The border will stand in your way if you're poor. They won't let you into the country because, yeah, somebody's worried about that you're going to take something from them that otherwise could have went to somebody who's already there, who's already better off. They say that criminals will be kept out of the country, and the argument is that if you try to cross the border illegally, then you must be a criminal. Could it be that perhaps you're not really that bad, but you're desperate? You're desperate for a better life, and for some reason, because that country you're trying to get to is not attainable for you, it's not open to you. You're building an image in your mind that says, this got to be awesome. This, just cross that border and life's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. And that's what's going on. That's what I see going on. If you're from the wrong country with a currency that isn't worth real much, I think the border is a big obstacle for you. Now, if you're rich, who cares? The visa costs like so and so many hundred of pesos. Well, I don't care. See what I'm saying? Borders are protecting an elite. They're not protecting you or I. And when they tell you that people from other countries are coming in here to take your job, if you're doing your job really well, then you shouldn't have nothing to worry about. Correct me if I'm wrong. See, statistics actually say that in the case of the United States, the crime rate among immigrants is significantly lower than among US citizens. And that should tell you something right there. Doesn't it say that perhaps the US, maybe Canada making the same mistakes, is keeping the wrong people out and letting the wrong people in? Puppets at the border. Borders give governments the power to say that you can't cross that line. If you want to cross that line, you have to do A, B, and C, whatever, whatever it may be. But do you want your government to have that power? Do you believe that all bad things come from other countries? I'm not saying borders are totally useless. In some cases, differences in the way human rights are interpreted could be a big problem for opening borders. We couldn't eliminate borders just from one day to the next without coordination between countries. I think there need to be negotiations and all this, but my honest opinion is that the less barriers we put up between people of different origins, different countries, the better this world will be. There'll be no reason to fight wars because we can work out differences. We get to know each other. Those people who have never traveled outside their country, I urge you, cross a few borders and experience a different country, even the ones that scare you, whose immigrants scare you, because you will see that their living conditions may be not as bad as you think. There might not be the chaos that they told you that this country represents, and it'll just open your mind. Now, this is going to be enough for one video. I'm intending to make a little series out of this. Borders. What purpose do they serve? And what's your experience and your relationship with borders? Myself, as a traveler, I don't like them. I don't mind there being a line between two countries where one administration is in charge versus another, and I don't mind a difference in culture. I can recognize that. I can enjoy that. But when it comes to enforcing certain rules that are put in place just to divide people, I have a problem with that. And then the corruption at the border. I mean, sometimes, especially Central America, I notice this, lots of times you're asked for money and put a stamp on your passport and go on. Hey, where's my receipt? Your what? We don't do receipts here, sir. No tenemos. One exception, by the way, that might surprise you and definitely surprised me was El Salvador. There's a big sign at the border saying that border services in El Salvador are free. So if anybody tries to charge you money for them, you know right away that it's not legit. Now, surprisingly, Mexico is a different way. There was actually an occasion where I looked up on the internet and I was so sure that I wasn't going to have to pay to leave Mexico on a land border if I wasn't returning to Mexico. And I knew exactly what to say to the border guard if they asked me for money. Somehow they managed to squeeze some money out of me anyways. Lots of people told me in comments, even on my other channel and this channel, that bringing a drone into Mexico has cost them hundreds of dollars because they get charged on the value of the drone and there's a tax and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but is it legit? You'd pay that same tax for your cell phone or your camera when you go into Mexico? No. Why would a drone be any different? The drone doesn't stay in Mexico, or does it? This I feel very strongly about. I don't like borders. What's your feeling? Do you feel threatened by people from other countries coming into your country? And I'm talking to you if you're basically in any country, but let's just assume you're in the United States or Canada, where border security has been on the radar ever since Trump took office. Well, aside from drugs coming in through the border, which is like the narrative now, what are you worried about? And you really believe that all bad things have to come across a border, or they could even originate in your own country? Do you remember the story I told you at the beginning of this video about myself traveling through the Yukon into Alaska? Well, just in case you were wondering, I didn't go to jail. The questioning by the border guard turned eventually from an interrogation into a normal conversation between two guys. This border guard was just a dude like myself, not much older, and he actually liked the idea of traveling across North America without worrying too much about the border. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I kind of hit a note with you. I want to start a discussion about these borders. We got to break them down, guys. We don't want no more wars and conflicts between leaders of different countries when we, as ordinary people, are so much alike, no matter what the language, no matter what the color. We have more in common than divides us. Let's build on that. Let's get rid of these artificial lines like Trump says, which doesn't mean that Canada, where I live, should become the 51st state. No, absolutely not. But all these rules, all this bureaucracy, It's slowing down economies. It's dividing people. Not a good thing. I'll see you next time. If you want to see more of my channel, hey, by all means, I got videos. Enjoy.